we're going to listen to that conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus, who is a teacher of the law. And in the narrative that we have that was collected into the biblical text, it is in John 3. I mean, Jesus didn't write John 3, you get that, right? But the people who collect all the snippets within the oral tradition. I think it's really interesting that this narrative kind of then morphs into that narrative that has been much overused and abused, that for God so loved the world that he. So it's very interesting that we need to go back to, I think, this very playful conversation that Jesus has with Nicodemus. And Jesus is simply trying to invite Nicodemus to do this, to do this, to do the kind of thing that you and I would do if we just sat ourselves under a tree somewhere. And I'm going to read it to you from Eugene Peterson's translation called The Message. There was a man of the Pharisee sect, Nicodemus, a prominent leader and teacher among the Jews. Late one night, he visited Jesus and said, "Rabbi, we all know that you are a teacher straight from God. No one could do all the God-pointing and God-revealing acts you do if God weren't in on it." Jesus replied, "You are absolutely right. Take it from me. Unless a person is born from above, it's not possible to see what I'm pointing to." "How can anyone," said Nicodemus, "be born who has already been born and grown up? You can't re-enter your mother's womb and be born again. What are you saying with this born from above talk?" Jesus said, "You're not listening. Let me say it again. Unless a person submits to this original creation, the wind hovering over the water creation, the invisible moving the visible, a baptism into a new life, it is not possible to enter God's kingdom." When you look at a baby, it's just that, a body you can look at and touch. But the person who takes shape within is formed by something you can't see and touch, the Spirit. So don't be surprised when I tell you that you have to be born from above, out of this world, so to speak. You know well enough how the wind blows this way and that. You hear it rustling through the trees. But you have no idea where it comes from or where it's headed next. That's the way it is with everyone born from above by the wind of God, the Spirit of God. You hear it in the rustling of the trees, but you have no idea where it comes from or where it is headed next. That's the way it is with everyone born from above by the wind of God. You can imagine Nicodemus, teacher of the law, well-educated, well-respected, walking on the straight and narrow path, following all of the rules of his tradition. But there is something deep within him that is nagging him to attend to. Something that sends him sneaking out to visit Jesus at night. Because Nicodemus knows somehow that in Jesus is a God pointer. Somebody that is pointing to the spirit of creativity and compassion that is at the heart of the universe and is bigger than any law or any one spiritual tradition. But how? Asks Nicodemus, who is used to living inside the lines. Well, in essence, Jesus replies, you need to be open to the mystery. You need to submit to the wind that blows over creation. And it's unpredictable and surprising and refreshing and sometimes scary. So I have two thoughts about this conversation. I think the first thought has to do with revisiting that invitation to be born again. That much used and abused invitation to be born again. What might it mean to be born again and again and again every day? So Matthew Fox shares the history of this path of renewal. He shares with us the words of a woman who was Mechthild of Magdeburg. She was known as a Beguine, and she lived in the 13th century. So a Beguine was somebody who was a member of a women's movement. They were neither nuns nor were they married, but they created a third lifestyle, living together in community, making a living with their hands as a rule, and dedicating their lives together to serving the young and the sick and the poor. She wrote in her journal every day, and she says a lot about play. She writes, I, God, am your playmate. I will lead the child in you in wonderful ways, for I have chosen you, beloved child. Come swiftly to me, for I am truly in you. She goes on to write, God leads us. God leads the child he has called in wonderful ways. God takes the soul to a secret place, for God alone will play with it in a game of which the body knows nothing. God says, I am your playmate. Your childhood was a companion of my Holy Spirit. Sing for joy and laugh, for I, the Creator, am truly subject to all creatures. So it's a very, very different image of God, and certainly contrary to the one that was in the world in which she lived. But she could see with life in the community and in her daily devotional life as she made her way through her day, that there was something within God, within Spirit, that was profoundly mysterious, mystical, and at the same time playful. Meister Eckhart, another 13th century priest, says, and this is where I think we get even further into that understanding of being born again and again and again. I am younger today than I was yesterday, and if I'm not younger tomorrow than I am today, I would be ashamed of myself. And so Matthew Fox concludes with these words, perhaps the time has come to play with God more than to pray to God. And in our play, true prayer will emerge, and we will emerge younger, fresher, greener. And I think that's what a glorious summer day does for us, as long as the humidex isn't 40. We understand, right? But the lovely breezes, the wind blowing through the trees, the waves on the lake, something flying in the sky. And we are born anew to our place in this universe. So when I think about those people that I know who, even as they age, kind of on some level get younger because their spirit is more in touch with the glory of it all, I think about Wilma McCaig, who died last year. Some of you may have known her. In one of the last encounters with her, I asked her how she was. And she said, "I'm just wonderful, Lynn. I'm writing more poetry, and I'm doing some acting, and even a little bit of painting. I am loving old age." And I thought to myself, God pointer, spirit blown. So you recall that last week I shared with you those words spoken to me by an 87-year-old I was visiting, who finally recognized that she could very well be near the end of her life. And her biggest regret is that she didn't recognize what a great life she had. So there was this bitterness just under the surface. And I don't say that in judgment at all. But I compare that 87-year-old and the bitterness to the Wilma McCaig and went, just playing. And we all know she had her aches and pains and cataracts and everything else, but still chose to be connected to that deeper, deeper spirit, to live as one who was wind-blown in gratitude and praise. So, the second thing I want to say in response to this passage is I want to say something about trees. Aside from the appearance of a tree by day or night, is it not kin of the human family with its roots in the earth and its arms stretching toward the sky, as if to seek and to know the great mystery? So trees, like Jesus said, maybe we have something to learn. You hear it in the rustling of the trees, but you have no idea where it comes from or where it's headed next. That's the way it is with everyone born from above by the wind of God. So, what Jesus did more than anything else in his teaching is that he helped his community reframe the way that they understood God. And very often, because he spent most of his time teaching outside, he would very often point to the natural world around him. Consider the lilies of the field. They're not freaking out with anxiety, are they? Maybe we can learn from them. Look at this tree here. It's got all this dead stuff on it. Cut it off. Make room for new growth. That's a lesson. And now in this passage, pay attention to the wind in the trees. It's not that complicated, Jesus says to Nicodemus. Sit under a tree and rethink everything you believe about God. So I've had a lovely summer, and among my most cherished memories is a 3-day canoe trip that I made with my sister and friends in Algonquin Park. We had an island campground from which we made day trips. And one afternoon, I retired to the tent I was sharing with my sister, which basically had a skylight in it a mesh ceiling. And there I lay for 2 hours. And although this is the wrong kind of tree, it was a canopy of pines. Way. The canopy was way, the way it is when they're all so close together. And they were swaying, these pines, to the rhythm of the wind. And I just disappeared into both a sense of mystery, but also a sense of being part of something so much bigger than myself and what was going on in my head. And that was salvation for me that day. John Muir, the American naturalist, wrote, "Few are altogether deaf to the preaching of the pine trees." So I hope that you've had some time this summer to play, to green, to be born anew, to live out of your deep mystical identity, made in the image of God, to play in the company of a playful God. And I hope you've had some time to experience the wind in the trees and to learn from these tall, lofty, resilient mentors. There are teachers to move and to sway in the deep rhythm of creation, and to understand yourself as woven into the shared life of earth and sea and sky. It is into this cosmic community of the beloved that we are called, and in it we are blessed.